All right. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Śrīla Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All right. Om Jnanatimrandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Svayam Rupa Kada Mahyam Datati Svapadantikam Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So I'm really happy to see everyone here this morning. It's very delightful. Especially in the winter months, we usually have a little bit of a small crew. But our Zoom room's been pretty solid lately. Zoom attendance is up. In-person attendance is a little bit down. But that's just the times. So not complaining, just expressing my sincere gratitude and happiness that you're all here in person with us today. Especially coming from out of state to get an experience of the Harmony Collective. I'm sure not just for the class. If I'd known we were having some guests, I maybe would have reconsidered, because this is part 4, as you can see, the 4 out of 5. So there have been 3 sessions previously. So forgive me if things are kind of coming quickly, or feel free to ask questions as we go along also. That's all right. I already had planned each session we begin with a review. So maybe we'll just take a little bit more time with the review. Again, this is a book on the process of bhakti by a devotee named Viśvanātha Cakravartī Ṭhākura. So he was the 4th generation from Narottam Das. Narottam Das was 2, or you could say 3 generations from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself. Narottam did not directly meet Lord Chaitanya, but he did meet Lord Chaitanya's students, the 6 Goswamis. So 4 generations later, in the 1600s, 1700s, there lived a devotee named Sri Viśvanātha. And he is very well known for his writings, especially his commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam. He also wrote a commentary on the Bhagavad Gita. And he was a very deeply realized devotee. This is one of his books, the Madurai Kadambini, which means the cloud bank of sweetness. So a cloud bank is not just a single cloud in the sky, but it's a whole row of clouds that covers the whole horizon. So bhakti, and specifically this bhakti movement of Krishna Chaitanya, is like a cloud bank. So it's not just giving a little bit of water to pacify the parched souls of the world, but it's drenching the whole landscape in nectar, sweetness. Because we all want to be happy, but most of us seek happiness through our mind and senses. We forget that the soul is what's actually seeking pleasure. I'm a spiritual being. I need spiritual pleasure, spiritual sustenance. So this is not ordinary rainwater that this process of bhakti is pouring down. It's pouring down spiritual water. And it fully satisfies the heart, the soul. So this book, we've already discussed, is about the stages of bhakti. And each chapter, more or less, each chapter in the book, there's 8 chapters. More or less, each chapter corresponds to one of the 9 stages. So 8 chapters, 9 stages, he kind of crunches two of them into one of the early chapters. The stages of bhakti, does anyone know? They would like to say. What's the first one? Shraddha, faith. Faith is the beginning. Faith is there in the beginning of any endeavor. Before we do anything, we should have some idea that it's going to work or it's going to be helpful or good. So everything begins with a little bit of faith. In relationships, you need faith. You need to think that this is a trustworthy person. This person's not, some Russian or a spy or like a undercover agent from the CIA, trying to get my details. Some people think that they're a little bit unstable, mentally unstable. They think that the CIA is after them, and it's hard for them to have relationships because they don't know who they're dealing with. So we have to have some faith in people just to interact, faith to get on a plane. So everything begins with faith. The next is association with devotees. That's because bhakti is practiced by devotees. If you want to do something, then you find people who do that. And you hang out with them. You learn from them. You get inspiration from them. So that's the second stage, is just being around the people who do bhakti. Third stage is called Bhajana Kriya. We have Dana Kriya here, Dana Kriya Prabhu. So Dana Kriya means the act of dan, or charity, giving in charity. And Bhajana Kriya means the act of bhajan, or worship. So the activity of the devotee is bhajan. They worship God. They pray. They do so much practical service in the world to glorify God and help others remember God and chant Krishna's names and all of these different activities of bhakti. So when a person has faith and they associate with devotees, then they naturally take up the process themselves. That's bhajan. From bhajan comes purification of the heart. As we engage in spiritual activity, gradually the unwanted things in the heart start to be cleansed and they go away. Our consciousness is gradually spiritualized by associating with Krishna and Krishna's spiritual names, his spiritual form in the form of the deity, his devotees who are also spiritual. So all of these things elevate our consciousness, purify, uplift our consciousness so that we start to experience and display all good qualities and all the bad qualities that degrade us, the unwanted habits and weaknesses that we have, we could call our lower nature, gets removed. Then we become steady in our practice, that our lower tendencies, our bad habits are mostly gone, and our practice of bhakti goes on uninterrupted. Then we get taste. That's the sixth stage after steadiness is taste. We start to develop a great liking for bhakti. That's one of the stages we're going to discuss today. We'll begin with discussing taste. Last week we covered purification and steadiness. So this week we're covering taste, and then after taste comes attachment. What happens when you have a taste for something? You become attached. You start to want it all the time. We have to be careful with I have two kids. One is a 4.5-year-old named Janaki, and one is a 2.5-year-old named Lakshman. So a girl and a boy. And we have to be careful about what shows we let them watch on YouTube, because some of them are very stimulating for the mind, not in like a wholesome way, but in like a overstimulating way. Even there's a couple Krishna shows that are like that. We have to be kind of careful, too many flashing lights and moving pictures. It's just like, it becomes so tasty for the mind, for the eyes, that an addiction forms. So this also happens in spiritual life, but in spiritual life, it's a good addiction. It's good. It's like, imagine being addicted to helping people. That's not so bad. You can use that to make spiritual progress. If you become addicted to that feeling of helping somebody, it's a good feeling when you help somebody. So if you become addicted to that, then you can use that to do good things in the world. So similarly, becoming addicted to the taste of bhajan, worship, chanting Krishna's names, worshiping his deity, serving his devotees, that's a good addiction. That's the 7th stage. From that addiction comes spiritual emotion or ecstasy. All of the feelings that we have in this body are reflections of original spiritual feelings that exist in the spiritual world. Some people think that spiritual life is devoid of feeling, that it's just like a merging. I enter the light, I become one with the light. That's a certain conception of spiritual perfection, and that is a possible attainment. However, beyond the impersonal attainment is personal liberation, in which a person has a spiritual body, a spiritual mind, and spiritual emotion. We feel dynamic spiritual feelings of love for Krishna. Actually, all feelings are a transformation of love. The opposite of love is indifference. If you're indifferent to something, then you don't have any anger towards it. You don't have any greed. You don't have any love. You don't feel friendship. If you're indifferent, then you just have no feelings. But even anger and these other emotions are transformations of affection. Because I care about you, I feel angry when you behave in a certain way or something like that. So in the spiritual reality, all of Krishna's devotees are constantly exchanging so many feelings of love with him. And spiritual perfection is to revive those loving feelings so that we can also experience them. Emotion is the most meaningful experience, is the aesthetic experience that we have as human beings. And when we awaken spiritual emotion, it's incredibly satisfying and enlivening. And when those spiritual emotions mature, when they fully ripen, they become pure love, spiritual love, prema. So that's the final stage. We're not going to discuss that one today. We're going to leave that for next weekend. So today we're going to discuss taste, attachment, and spiritual emotion, or bhava. How does a conditioned soul attain to bhakti? This we discussed in the first presentation. That is by the association of other devotees. In general, this is how desires enter into the heart, is by associating with others who have those desires. When somebody comes up to you and says, hey, did you see that movie last weekend? You're like, no, how was it? And they say, oh my gosh, it was amazing. And you think, wow, I should go see that. Or our trip to Hawaii was the best time of my life. It's always 72 degrees there. And the coconut water is amazing. Something, whatever. Then you're like, wow, I got to go to Hawaii and try me some of that Hawaiian coconut water, So when we associate with people and they glorify their experiences, we develop some desire, some attraction to that. So when we spend time with Krishna's devotees, then naturally the desire to also have a relationship with Krishna enters our heart. Bhakti is considered the best process of spiritual elevation because anyone can do it. A lot of other practices, for example, certain types of yoga require very, very difficult austerities. There's one type of yoga where you have to stop breathing altogether. So sound easy? Not so much. It's a little scary. There is one yogi, I've been rereading this book called The Journey Home. It's a wonderful book by Radhanath Swami, and he describes all the different types of yogis and sages and sadhus he meets in India. And one of them, his yoga practice, he was also a bhakti yogi, but one of the practices he adopted, which doesn't strictly fall in the category of bhakti, because it's a type of austerity, but it can work, but it's not required for everyone. This person, Radhanath Swami referred to as the standing yogi, because he had splints that he attached to his ankles to help support his body. And for 50 years, since he had met, since Radhanath Swami met him, for the past 50 years, he had never sat down or laid down. He stood, and to go to sleep, he strung a rope with a plank, and he leaned against the plank and went to sleep. He strung it over like a tree branch. So there's certain types of yoga that require these types of very, like, really stringent practices to beat the mind and senses into submission very forcefully. But bhakti is like the process of like winning over the mind with just higher pleasure, basically. That by exposing the mind to higher, more pleasurable experiences, the mind naturally gives up its attraction to material pleasure and starts to think, hey, yeah, I'm on board. Bhakti sounds pretty good. Let's do it. Let's do this. That takes time, but that's gradually how it happens. Also, one other aspect of bhakti that's special is even if you don't, well, one thing is, even if you don't perform it perfectly, let's say you make tons of mistakes, still you'll get some result. Whereas other practices, if you make a mistake, you can get like a negative result. For example, like in cooking, if you mix salt with sugar, you get a big difference. It's like it doesn't come out. It's practically inedible. If you salt a laddu instead of or sweet rice, you put salt instead of sugar. You're not going to get a good result. But bhakti, even we make little mistakes here and there, still Krishna accepts our service. Those are just some of the reasons why bhakti is considered the best. So in the second part of this series, we covered these topics. Shraddha, faith. It doesn't just mean a kind of sentimental attraction, although that's part of it, but specifically Shraddha refers to faith in scripture. Because most people go around living life on the basis of the information they acquire through their mind and senses. But these are faulty sources of information because we're limited beings. Our senses are imperfect. The only way to have perfect knowledge is if it comes from a perfect source. And thankfully, Krishna has provided that source in the form of the Vedas, the revealed scriptures. So Shraddha specifically means faith in scripture. Now, it's not blind faith. Blind faith is never encouraged. We're encouraged to put into practice the teachings of scripture to see the results for ourselves. This is how faith develops. If we see some person who has a lot of money and they start telling us how they made their money and how a business should be run, we have faith because we see the results. This person has a lot of money, he must know what he's talking about. But then if we put those business principles into practice and they don't work for us, then our faith is broken. So we should find somebody who we can see they know the scriptures and their lives reflect the teachings of scriptures, so they clearly know what they're talking about. And then when they give us some guidance, some instructions, we should put those into practice in our lives. And then if we have some experience, we can go to that person and say, hey, this is what's happening. Should I change something, do something else? And then they'll give us feedback. And then more and more, our experience will start to line up with the desired outcome that's stated in the scripture. So it's not blind faith, but it does have to be anchored in something substantial, not just my whim, oh, Krishna seems cool. It's more significant than that. Although Krishna is cool, but it's more significant than that. Pure bhakti means bhakti that is not polluted by any other desire. I'm not doing bhakti to get anything from Krishna. I'm doing bhakti just to get love for him and to express my love for him. The two types of bhakti are Vaidhi and Raganuga, or regulated practice and spontaneous practice. The splendors or glories of sadhana bhakti, devotional practice, are Klesha Gni and Shubhada. Klesha Gni means the destruction of all suffering. That's pretty good, right? Yeah, a lot of people want that. Destroy suffering. Bhakti does that. Actually, even in the stage of practice, even before attaining the perfectional stage, we can experience suffering disappear from our lives. And Shubhada means the attainment, or Da means giver. Bhakti is the giver of Shubha, all good qualities, all auspicious qualities. So these are two kind of sides of a coin. As the negative qualities in life decrease, all of the positive qualities of life manifest. The 6 characteristics of unsteady bhakti. I'm going to get out my book to make sure I get them all here. Let's see. The first one is utsahamai. This means a kind of false or excessive enthusiasm. So these 6 characteristics are very helpful because they're helpful to know, because if we have them, then we know we're still on the unsteady platform. Unsteady. Unsteady means that we're practicing bhakti, but it's not yet solid. Like a plant, you know. I have 2 tulsi plants at home, and they're steady. They're steady plants. They're pretty mature. Like, you know, they've got the stem, the trunk is like, you know, this thick, maybe 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch thick. It's a pretty solid plant. But for the first few weeks, you know, they weren't so steady. We had to be very gentle with them. We still are gentle. My wife doesn't let me touch them. She's the tulsi servant at our home. But, you know, a plant in the beginning, it's very fragile. If the pot gets tipped over, the whole plant might die, you know. So unsteady bhakti has 6 characteristics. I'll just list them off quickly. False enthusiasm, which is kind of like excessive enthusiasm. Like, I think I'm, you know, already doing great, but I just started. You know, like if I start to learn mridanga and I can play 1 beat and I think, yeah, I got this, you know, then they change the time signature and whoa, maybe you can play, you know. So there's a natural kind of tendency to overestimate our capacity in the beginning. The next is called ghanatarla, or thick thin. Thick thin. This means that for a week or a month, I'm very enthusiastic. Yeah, I'm going to be a pure devotee. Krishna is the best. And then the next month, ooh, I don't know if I can handle this bhakti yoga. I got to take a break. The third one is vyudavikalpa. This means indecisiveness, a kind of prolonged absorption in decision-making, like the different options that we have in spiritual life. Viśvanātha Ṭhākura gives the example of getting married. Should I get married, or should I remain a brahmachari, a monk in the temple? And then instead of just chanting your rounds and doing service, you just spend all your time absorbed in that question for weeks, months, maybe years. It doesn't take that long to make a decision, actually. Making a decision is as simple as, you know, like, okay, let's see. So these are the advantages, these are the disadvantages. This is what my life would look like here. This is what my life would look like there. Okay, I'll go with that one. You know, a person who's advanced, they're able to kind of, you know, maybe it doesn't go quite that fast, but by consulting with their seniors, by considering, you know, their own situation, then they just make a decision. But in the unsteady stage, we become so kind of preoccupied with decisions that we get distracted from our bhakti. It's kind of a way of distracting ourselves. The next is Vishaya Sangra, battle with the sense objects. So we have everyone has different sense objects that are their favorite sense objects. And when the mind is being harassed by memories of those sense objects, wow, how nice was that? That was such a nice experience. Or if only, couldn't I just have a little bit of, again, you know, whatever it might be. And when those kinds of thoughts distract us from our bhakti, that's called Viśaya Sangra, the battle with the senses. Yes, Guru.
Are these chronological at all, or are they kind of popping up?
Kind of, but not specifically. So they'll more than one will be there at a time in the unsteady stage.
Yeah,
multiple.
I mean, is I'm forgetting now the first one that you mentioned, but is it like
Utsamai,
I
yeah.
mean, that's normally you see that like in the earlier stages of one's, or at least in the earlier manifestations of one's practice of bhakti.
Yeah.
Right? And then,
It does seem like there's a sense of chronology, but not strictly so. It'll look different in different people's lives. Some may struggle more with one or the other, and multiple of them may be manifest.
it's due to aparad that these things come.
We'll cover that in the next review slide. These are just symptoms of unsteadiness. So it's not exactly due to aparad, it's just due to one's bhakti being unsteady. And then the next is niyama akshama, inability to maintain vows. So maybe one day you resolve, from now on, I'm going to wake up by 4 a.m. every day for the rest of my life. And then 3 days later, you snooze, that happens. That happens. So then the next is Drangarangani, which is the tendency to ride the waves of material pleasure that come along with one's practice of bhakti. Bhakti comes with certain facilities like praise, like sometimes different types of material enjoyment come. And so when we become content just to enjoy those different side effects or byproducts of bhakti, that's an obstacle. That's a symptom of unsteadiness. All right, one more review slide before we get into today's content. I don't want to take too long with review, but it's good because we've got some new people. What's this chat box here? Okay. Hare Krishna. Courting the senses and the mind. Oh, nice. Sri Radha. Yeah, courting. Bhakti courts the senses and the mind. It doesn't beat them into submission. It courts them, wins them over. Nice one. Yeah, I like that. Courting the senses and mind. All right, let's see if we can get it to go to the next one here. There we go. All right, so we've already kind of covered some of these. We'll just go through them a little bit more quickly. I can share these slides with anyone who wants, and also these are available on YouTube, the previous series. So don't strain your hands too hard taking notes and stuff. Note taking is great. We welcome it. I encourage it. However, I'm going to go through this a little bit quickly. So don't freak out. It's all recorded forever on the internet. How does anartha nivritti, purification, happen? By bhajan, by devotional practice. It's as simple as that. Just by hearing and chanting about Krishna, exposure to Krishna and Krishna bhakti, we become purified of unwanted things in the heart. The 4 types of anarthas are anarthas arising from pious activity, anarthas arising from sinful activity, anarthas arising from bhakti itself, and anarthas arising from offenses. There are 4 types of anarthas, unwanted things in the heart. So an example of an anartha arising from piety is the desire, like a pride. You could say, well, we'll leave that one for bhakti. An example I like to give is a desire to just have a very comfortable, happy, nice life. Or another one, anartha arising from pious activity is the desire for liberation, impersonal liberation. Shanti, I just want to merge into eternal peace, no endeavor, no effort, no difficulty, just peace. From sinful activity, the anarthas that come are sinful desires, sinful tendencies, like degrading, destructive tendencies, addictions to unwholesome things. From bhakti, an anartha that can come is a sense of pride in one's devotional accomplishments. Look, wow, I'm becoming such a great devotee now. I'm practically a saint. or also attachment to the various facilities that come with the performance of bhakti, like respect, honor, maybe some position, some special status, different things. And from nama parad, these are the 5 symptoms of nama parad. See if I can remember them. Crookedness or duplicity, presenting oneself as one thing, but internally having a different feeling, a different desire. Like externally saying, oh, Guru, my Guru, you saved my life. I'm eternally indebted to you. And then in your heart, you're thinking, I would have been okay. There's a lot of gurus out there. This one's okay. But externally praising, Or, oh, Krishna, please save me. I want to just love you. I don't want anything else. And then the next day you're like, Krishna's such a jerk. How could he do this to me? This is duplicity. Another symptom of nama parad, offenses to the name in our chanting, is pride. This is listed, pride in one thinking oneself to be a great devotee. Another one is laxity in one's devotional practice. Another one is absorption in sense objects that erode one's faith. So becoming absorbed in things that erode one's faith. And another one is faithlessness in general, just losing faith in the process of bhakti. So these are the symptoms of offenses to the name. And nama parad are the anarthas that take the longest to go away. So these are the ones we should especially be attentive to, is that we want to have really quality experience in our chanting, being very devout and attentive and prayerful. That this process is the process that's going to fulfill all of my desires. So I want to be attentive to it. This holy name is non-different from Krishna. It is Krishna in the form of sound. And the 2 types of steadiness, the 5 obstacles to steady bhakti. These are similar to the symptoms of unsteadiness, but they're a little bit different. The first one is sleep, the tendency to fall asleep when chanting or hearing or trying to remember the Lord. The next one is vikshepa, when material thoughts and desires interfere with our chanting or our remembrance. This can also be like if we're hearing about Krishna and we start to like project ourselves. This kind of happens when you're reading fiction. You kind of start to identify with the character. So like if you start to kind of identify with Krishna, maybe like, oh, I wonder what it'd be like to have thousands of gopis, That's a kind of mental projection, which is not helpful. It's an obstacle. Or maybe we project our own kind of mundane conception of romance onto the pure spiritual loving interactions of Krishna and his devotees. That's another way that this can manifest. Another one is apratipatti. This is spiritual indifference. Being, for whatever reason, just because of our conditioning, just not feeling like worshiping Krishna at any given time. I just don't feel like chanting. I just don't feel like, I don't have taste for it, so I just feel indifferent. That's another obstacle to steadiness. Kashaya means sinful tendencies, sinful habits, and rasasvada is taste for material enjoyment. So the attachments that we have and the specific taste, the hankering that we have for these things. And then the 2 types of steadiness are, one may be either steady externally or internally. So again, this is all covered in the previous sessions, but I like to review because it helps drive the things home. So we can hopefully take something away that we remember, we kind of learn something, not just information goes in and out. And the two types of steadiness are that one may be steady externally, like I wake up at the same time, I get my rounds done, I read my pages of the Shastra, I know how to act in a respectful way, I know how to act in a humble way, etc. And the different type of steadiness is from a day-to-day basis, I'm actually enthusiastic about Bhakti Yoga. It's more of an internal thing. Both are important, but of the two, the second type is more important. A person may be steady from day to day, in Bhakti, but be struggling to kind of manifest that on the external level, versus another person may be externally steady, but internally they're committed to the process. So those are two different types. We should cultivate both. Okay, that ends our review. So each time the review gets longer. But anyway, we only have one more week of the seminar, so that's about as long as it's going to get. Then anyway, next week it'll be a lot of review. Anyway, next week the whole topic is mostly review, so it'll be like one big review week. So yeah, Daima, you wanted to ask something?
If you could just clarify the last point you made, like you can be externally steady but internally not steady, and then you can also be internally steady but doesn't appear externally that you're steady.
Yeah.
You're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Nishtita Bhakti means steadiness of two types, concerning Bhakti directly and concerning elements favorable to Bhakti. So one type of steadiness is that, every day and like basically pretty much everything I'm doing, I'm trying to worship the Lord with my actions, my mind, and my words. But a person who's steady in the externals, they may be very respectful, friendly, merciful, tolerant, etc. But internally, they're not as really fixed on Krishna, actually, but they play the role pretty well. So those are two different types, and we want to cultivate both.
So what I've heard that described, I forget, there was a different translation Madurai Kadambini I read, and it's saying that actually characterizing the external following, but the internal cultivation hadn't happened, like that development was considered anishtita.
Yeah, you could still call that like not yet fully steady,
Yeah.
but it's a type of steadiness, is to become steady in the external activities and external qualities. Is a type of steadiness, but you wouldn't call it completely.
So you wouldn't characterize as the actual state of nishta.
Yeah.
Is that an external steadiness? Could that just arise from like such a boon?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be transcendental per se.
Yeah. I mean, somebody could theoretically manifest those qualities for some time without bhakti, but that would be temporary. So, yeah. All right. So we'll get into these invocation prayers. Shridva pre nava bhakti shasya vitate sanjivani svagama rambe kamata partudaha damani vishvapagolasini duran me marushakino pisarasi abhavaya bhuyat prabhu Shri Chaitanya Kripa Nirankushamaha Madhurya Kadambini. The mercy of Swayam Bhagavan Shri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is like a limitless, uncontrolled cloud bank of extraordinary nectar that falls like rain on the heart of the sadhaka, or the spiritual practitioner. The shower of his mercy fully bestows vitality upon the crops of the ninefold limbs of devotion, such as Shravan and Kirtana, that have been hearing and chanting, that have been freshly sown in the field of the practitioner's heart. Even the first appearance of the cloud bank of Mahaprabhu's mercy dispels the virulent, burning sensation felt during the summer season, the various material desires for one's own enjoyment, and makes jubilation swell within the heart of all devotees throughout the universe, like rivers swelling from rainfall. May that unrestrained and unlimitedly powerful cloud bank of Srimad Mahaprabhu's sweet mercy, the influence of which is felt even from a great distance, fill me, a dry, lifeless tree in the desert, with life-giving rasa. Bhakti purvaishrita tantu rasam pashyed yadatadhi tam naumi satatam rupa nama priya janam hare. The most elevated saints of former times also accepted the shelter of Bhakti Devi. Now, however, by the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's most dear associate, Srila Rupa Goswami, people who have obtained real intelligence are directly perceiving Bhakti in its form of Bhakti Rasa. I offer my heartfelt obeisances unto Srila Rupa Goswami again and again. This verse specifically is glorifying Rupa Goswami for developing the science of spiritual aesthetics, rasa, this rasa tattva. That formerly people practiced bhakti, they worshiped Krishna, but they didn't quite understand how deep bhakti goes and the varieties of bhakti. It was kind of like in any way, Rupa Goswami brought a whole level of expertise to the field. So that's what this verse is saying. All right, so this presentation is covering from taste to spiritual emotion, and it's actually more succinct than our previous presentations because Viśvanātha Ṭhākura only gives a few pages for each of these stages. I did include a decent amount of excerpts. We may not read all of them, but you know, for anyone who's kind of checking the time and thinking, geez, he just spent an hour on review. Like, what are we going to do now? I don't want to sit here for another 2 hours. It'll go quickly. You know, it's just a few topics that we got to cover. So please don't worry. Ruchi, taste. Viśvanātha Ṭhākura says, when a devotee develops a taste for hearing, chanting, and other activities of bhakti that greatly surpasses his attraction to other things, that is called ruchi. Another translation I looked at described it a little bit differently, that the particular taste or attraction one develops for a practice of bhakti, like hearing or chanting, that is called taste. But both are helpful to think about. Taste is either the specific feeling and attraction I have for this type of devotional service, and it's also the general attraction I have for devotional service versus everything else I could do with my time. Unlike previous stages, at the state of ruchi, constant performance of hearing and chanting does not result in even the slightest fatigue. For instance, in this same book I was telling you about, The Journey Home, Radhanath Swami met this devotee, Krishnadas Babaji. And Radhanath Swami was describing how every Ekadashi, today's Ekadashi, Krishnadas Babaji would sit under a particular tamarind tree. There was a place of special significance. And he would, from sunset to sun up, chant japa. And he wouldn't fall asleep. And he would do this every Ekadashi, month after month, year after year. So that is a symptom that begins at ruchi, is one has so much taste. How many of us have stayed up all night before in our lives? Yeah. You know, whether it's when, you know, I used to watch movies or hang out with my friends, and we would just stay up all night and we didn't feel too tired. We'd be a little tired, but, you know, we'd stayed awake because we had taste for what we were doing. So similarly, the devotee develops so much taste. After steadiness, they develop so much taste that even they stay up all night just chanting or hearing about Krishna, talking about Krishna, serving Krishna, and they don't feel tired. And the next day they think, oh, maybe I should get a little bit of sleep. But it's not like, can't wait till I get to that bed. You know, they have taste. They don't want to go to sleep. And this ruchi quickly makes the devotee addicted to his practice of the various limbs of bhakti. So it quickly matures into attachment, asakti. How does, oh, Krishna, we didn't want that slide. Okay, there we go. That was from the previous presentation. We're going to skip that. What is ruchi? So Jiva Goswami defines ruchi as abhilas, or desire, but it's a desire that is supported or directed by the intelligence. Ruchi means desire for the Lord with direction by the intellect. And we're going to see the same sentence again when we get to attachment, because there's a sentence that comes after this that juxtaposes ruchi and asakti. So ruchi is desire sustained by the intellect, that I know this is something that's good, I'm going to do it. I have taste for it, but I don't have like so much attachment that I would just spontaneously do it without knowing that this is good for me. I know it's good for me and I like doing it, so I'm going to do it. I have taste. Asakti, or attachment, is I just naturally, spontaneously do these things. And anyway, we'll talk more about that. Yeah, Daimai.
So in the second canto we're reading, there's like one of the purports, Śrīla Prabhupada is describing how we can understand the presence of Paramatma, and one of them is that understanding, like he describes this, he has this big description, and one thing I remember from it is basically it's actually the Paramatma that is guiding our intelligence. And I was wondering if that has any relation, like, because he was describing how the intellect.
Yeah, definitely. So whether it's, Krishna says in the 15th chapter that that I am the source of all, I sit in the heart of every living being as the super soul, Krishna says, and I give people knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. They all come from me. So whenever we have any knowledge that manifests in our mind, material or spiritual, it's coming from Krishna, and it's in reciprocation with our desire. So when we pray for Krishna to guide us and protect us, he hears. And then when we start to get distracted from our bhakti, he might chirp in our ear, hey, you sure you want to do that? Maybe you want to do this instead. Why don't you just try chanting some japa? Or hey, why don't you just, call your friend? Call Anand Murari up, talk to him, see what he's doing. Call up Bhajana Kriya, call up Bhakti and Emily. You just call your spiritual buddy instead of going and hanging out with those guys. But if we're persistent, then finally Krishna will say, okay, yeah, well, you could do this and this and this, and that, he'll reciprocate with our desire, whatever that is. So yeah, that's the intelligence. And its intelligence is meant to be supported by scripture. That's Buddha yoga. It's based on what we've heard from our spiritual master and the Shastras. Then we remember that and we try to act accordingly. And there's 3 parts to this desire. This is described in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. The desire to attain the Lord, Praptyabhilash. The desire to be an agent for the Lord's pleasure, Svakartrikanukulyabhilash. And Sohard Abhilash, the desire for the Lord's affection. So these 3 desires mature in the stage of bhava bhakti. These are considered to be the 3 parts of the desire, like a threefold desire that the devotee has. And it's present to some degree in ruchi, in the stage of taste. Actually, our acharyas also use this same word ruchi to describe a preliminary stage of bhakti, like faith. That actually, even from faith and before, one has it's translated there as like interest. I have some interest or taste for bhakti. I like it. I have a liking for bhakti yoga, and that is a type of faith, it's a component of faith. So specifically, this section that we're talking about, this ruchi should be understood to only be describing the type of desires that a person has who's already on the stage of steadiness. You understand? So we have these desires, but like, I'll go back 2 slides, but we maybe get fatigued a little bit when we're hearing and chanting, or we show other symptoms of unsteadiness. So we should understand that the taste that I have is not yet the taste that's being described here as the taste that comes after It's a greater taste. It's a taste that's bordering on addiction. So we're not there yet. Okay. Yeah.
About the third one. So the desire for the Lord's affection, what does that look like? My mind kind of gets stumped on this because it seems like, isn't that a personal desire? Is it meaning like I want Krishna to love me, or?
Well, yeah. His mercy. We want his mercy. We want him to accept us. Prabhupada would say that the Hare Krishna Mahamantra we're chanting is, "O Krishna, O Radha, please engage me in your service." So we're asking something of them, but we're not asking that for our own pleasure. We're asking it for their pleasure. We're saying, I'm constitutionally an instrument of your pleasure. If you don't accept me as your servant, my existence is useless. And I can understand why you wouldn't want to accept me, because I have so many bad qualities and I've betrayed you a million billion times. So I could understand why you might not be so inclined to accept me as your servant. But still, please, see, right? So we're asking for something. We're asking for the Lord's affection. One saint says, Narottam Das Thakur says, "Please don't push me away from your lotus feet. Even though I've betrayed you, even though I've taken this priceless jewel of your mercy and thrown it away so many times. Please accept me. Please forgive me." Yeah, bro.
I was say, well, two things. Do you have a charger? Thanks.
Oh my gosh. Thank you.
And then I was going to say too, that desiring for the Lord's affection, the Lord wants to give us affection. Like that actually gives him pleasure. It's a service to receive his affection.
Nice.
So in being desirous of the Lord's affection that he's wanting to bestow on his devotees is actually a service. It's the same way like Radharani's praying often, she's like, Krishna wants to be with me. And so therefore she gets jealous when Krishna's not. It's not coming from some mundane jealousy. It's just she knows that she's able to satisfy Krishna the most. And so therefore from her, that's kind of it's her desire for the Lord's affection to serve him.
Madhavi has a similar comment. She says, "It's nice to hear the desire to attain the Lord is part and parcel of Ruchi. Sometimes practicing devotees give a misconception that pure devotion means I don't even desire the Lord practically. Like, I'll serve the Lord and I don't care if I ever meet him or get to be with him.
Whatever he wants.
Wherever I am, whatever he wants." But actually, what does love mean? Love means I can't live without you.
I'm bringing something.
It doesn't mean I'll take you or leave you. It means I can't live without you. I want to be with you. I want to see you. So yeah, very important. So yeah, does that help?
That was so helpful.
Good.
Yeah, thank you.
Great. Okay, good. Next one. Come on. There we go. So why don't we have taste? So if we don't have ruchi, what's going on? So Viśvanātha Ṭhākura also gives this analogy that's coming from the Nectar of Instruction. Syat Krishna nama charitari sitapya vidya pito patapta rasanasya narochikanu kintvada nudinam kalusaya vajushta svadvi kramadva vatitad gadambula hantri. The holy name, character, pastimes, and activities of Krishna are all transcendently sweet like sugar candy. Although the tongue of one afflicted by the jaundice of avidya, ignorance, cannot taste anything sweet, it is wonderful that simply by carefully chanting these sweet names every day, a natural relish awakens within his tongue, and his disease is gradually destroyed at the root. So jaundice causes a person that when they taste sweet things, it tastes bitter. I haven't had jaundice, so I can't speak from firsthand experience, but we've heard many times, this is what happens. Tastes bitter.
They have in a biology class one time they gave us these. Forget what the chemical was, but it was like a powder that reversed your
taste buds.
Taste buds.
Oh, Krishna.
So that then you'd like just ate sugar and it was like really bitter and
Wow.
you couldn't actually taste the sugar at all.
Wow.
So I've had
You've had that experience. Yeah. This is good. This is what Maya does, is it causes us to not taste the sweetness of Krishna and Krishna's names. But by chanting, so just as bhajan, the kind of preliminary stage of bhajan is just removing impurities, anarjana vritti. And after that's completed to a certain degree, then the main focus of bhajan becomes just increasing our taste and our attraction. So bhajan is still what's happening, chanting, the hearing, the devotional services. But at a certain time, once we get some positive, substantial taste for bhakti, then it starts to just increase more and more. There's two types of taste. Taste which is dependent on the external elements, like how good of a singer is leading the kirtan, how good of a mridanga player is playing the mridanga, or how good of a cook is cooking the meal that's being offered to the Lord. And the second type of taste, ruchi, which is the more advanced type, is independent, that one's taste for bhakti is constant, regardless of how fancy the feast is or how fancy the mridanga playing is. We just have taste for bhakti. There may be some increased taste when the elements are very good. If it's an especially artful and melodious kirtan, we may have more taste, but still we'll have an attraction to even a very basic kirtan also. Vishnu Ṭhākura gives the analogy, an example of a person who's hungry. In the first type, if they're dependent, then if it's like a dependent taste, then that would be like you ask somebody if they're hungry and they say, well, what's for dinner? Who cooked? Maybe I am, maybe I'm not.
Cooking?
Well, are you hungry or not? Well, who cooked? What's for dinner? But in the independent taste, your hunger is very strong. You say, yes, I'm hungry. Yes, I'll eat. I don't care if it's yesterday's, leftovers, like what everyone else didn't want. Please feed me. So it's a weaker taste and a stronger taste. Krishna Ṭhākura says that in the dependent ruchi, then there's still some residual impurity in the heart. Yes, Daimai?
I was wondering if this means that we have glimpses of ruchi in our earlier stages, and then once we're fully at the actual stage of ruchi, then we have the independent manifestation. Are they both characteristic of the development of full ruchi?
I would say it's these are two divisions of the stage that comes after steadiness.
Okay, so we can still have the dependent within that.
Yeah, yep. Description of a devotee with taste. This is the description. Vishnu Ṭhākura includes different descriptions of kind of how the devotee is thinking. So a devotee with taste might think like this. Fie on me, by the mercy of the lotus feet of Sri Guru, a most sinful person like me attained something as great as devotion to the Supreme Lord, but not understanding its value, I have forgotten about it. Just as one may forget a precious jewel bound within the hem of one's cloth. People used to do that. They would keep their valuables like a jewel or something tied in their chadar or in their dhoti. In this way, I wander here and there in the hope of attaining false, insignificant happiness, just as one searches in all four directions for a chipped cowrie. This is a type of shell that used to be used as currency. I have abandoned the practice of Bhagavad Bhakti and wasted my entire life wandering throughout the ocean of worldly sense gratification. By not accepting and engaging in any of the activities of Bhakti, I have exposed my complete powerlessness. So they have a deep remorse, deep feelings of remorse for all of the time spent not engaged in Bhakti yoga. It's like an entrepreneur, a man who wants wealth, if they miss an investment opportunity, like let's say, 20 years ago, a friend says, hey, you want to buy my 100 shares of Amazon stock? I'll give them to you for you can just have them. Or the kid who buys a bunch of Bitcoin for $1 each, and then he deletes it because this digital currency, this isn't going anywhere, right? So then after Bitcoin becomes 50, 60, whatever, how many thousands of dollars worth each, then he'll talk like this. Oh my God, what have I done? What a fool I am. So when a devotee has taste for bhakti, they feel that strong regret, remorse, repentance. What have I done? I've wasted my life. This is the most wonderful thing. Okay, I'm going to skip that one. I want to just move a little quickly. Okay, leaving aside all mundane talk, such a devotee first sits in an assembly of sadhus, then resides near those sadhus, and finally enters their fellowship. Sometimes he takes refuge in Bhagavan's holy abode, where he performs steadfast, immaculate service to him. He completely gives his mind to that service and eventually attains full absorption in it. To the ignorant, he appears to be scatterbrained, but the female dancer named Ruchi personally begins to give him lessons on the rapturous dance of bhajan, as if taking him by both hands. Consequently, that devotee is seized by an unprecedented joy. In due course, when the two teachers of dance, Bhava and Prema, make him dance, who can know in which realm of bliss he will reside? So Ruchi is compared to an instructress, a dance instructor, teaching the devotee how to dance with Krishna and spiritually. It's very sweet, very poetic, isn't it? Yeah, it's very nice. That's Ruchi, taste, and Bhava and Prema are like masters of dance. They're the graduate level instructors. Ruchi is like a tutor, and Bhava and Prema are like the masters, the master level, master class instructors in the dance of love with the Lord. Attachment. So that was Ruchi. This one will go a little bit more quickly. Attachment. Ruchi pertains to bhajan. This is Viśvanātha Chakravartī Thakur describing attachment, asakti. Ruchi pertains to bhajan. When Ruchi becomes highly mature and makes Sri Bhagavan, Krishna himself, the object of bhajan, that Ruchi is known as asakti or attachment. In other words, in the stage of taste, our taste is for the specific activities of bhakti. Like I may have greater taste for chanting kirtan or cooking or something that I take great pleasure in. I have taste for that activity. But in attachment, the object is Krishna. It doesn't matter what I'm doing, but I'm attached to Krishna. I'll do anything, whatever he wants. I'll do it and I'll feel great. I'll have great enjoyment for that. In reality, in both stages, it's both about the process and the person, Krishna. But for the sake of distinguishing the two, there's a greater emphasis on the person in attachment and on the process in the stage of taste.
This is asakti.
Asakti now, yeah, attachment. So here's that sentence I mentioned again from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu commentary. Ruchir abhilasha kintu buddhi purvakeyam asaktistu svarasiki. Ruchi means desire for the Lord, but with direction by the intellect. When that same desire becomes self-driven, it is known as asakti. So it's the difference between, a kind of natural like addiction, attachment, versus a taste or a desire in general. Yes.
Is this the difference of Vaidhi Bhakti and spontaneous?
No, this is the distinction. Although it's similar to that, there's a similar distinction between Vaidhi Bhakti and Raganuga Bhakti, but this is specifically describing the distinction between the stage of Ruchi, taste, and the stage of Asakti, attachment. And both those stages are there in Vaidhi and Raganuga Bhakti. Vaidhi Bhakti is when one's performance of Bhakti is impelled by the scriptural injunctions. And Raganuga Bhakti, it's impelled by ardent desire to attain a similar type of love, a similar mood of love as exhibited by one of the associates of Krishna in Vrindavan. So one is attracted to a specific type of service, and we'll get to that in the next topic, bhava, that'll come up.
Because you can even practice Raganuga, Sadhana, Jata Ruchi.
Yeah, so you can have Raganuga, you can perform Raganuga sadhana bhakti from the stage of Nishta and Ruchi also, even before attachment is there. Yeah.
What your goal is.
Description of a devotee with attachment. Previously, at the stages of Nishta and Ruchi, only when the sadhaka's desire was accompanied by such active resolve could he almost fully withdraw his mind from material sense objects and focus on meditating on the forms, qualities, and so forth of Sri Bhagavan. So it required a lot of determination to sustain his meditation in previous stages. Upon the awakening of asakti, however, even before the devotee desires it, that very same mind automatically meditates on Bhagavan's form and qualities. So in the stage of nishta, one will find his mind wandering from Krishna to other things. Before that, like unsteady bhakti and so on, it's very rare that you even really have a good meditation on Krishna at all. It's very difficult to sustain any kind of meditation or absorption and chanting his names. Our mind is so scattered. But as we become more and more steady and advanced, then it becomes easier and easier, but we still have to sustain it and do it kind of with some deliberation, like the previous sentence we were looking at, this buddhi purvikayam. It's supported by the intelligence. We have to sustain our meditation and our absorption, our attentiveness. But in asakti now, it's become spontaneous. It's become natural. And this is a different, spontaneous here doesn't mean raganuga. It just means like a natural addiction or attraction. It just automatically happens. I might be thinking of something else, material, like trying to figure out, this, like I'm on a website, I'm going to like get car insurance or something. And then my mind wanders to Krishna. And then 15 minutes later, I'm like, what was I doing? Oh yeah, I'm back to it's the opposite. See, it's the opposite of when I'm trying to chant, my mind wanders to car insurance. And then 15 minutes later, I'm like, oh my gosh, how many rounds did I just chant? The opposite happens with asakti, attachment. Yes, Tanmay.
I was wondering if the term Goswami is used in any of the specific stages, because it's like the mind is under our control. I just when you were talking about this, I was thinking, I know it's kind of tricky.
Yeah. You could say maybe steadiness, nishta.
Okay.
Nishta, that a person's conquered the lower modes of nature. I would say that's the minimum qualification of a sannyasi. Although Madhavi just quoted something from Bhakti Ṭhākura, which I wanted to see the quote. Right? She didn't show it to me yet. But she said that Bhakti Ṭhākura says bhava, one must have bhava.
To be considered Goswami?
To be qualified to take sannyas.
Oh,
so, but anyway, let's say at least nishta, steadiness, that then you've conquered your mind and senses to a significant degree. So, okay. This is further description of attachment. The devotee at the stage of nishta finds himself unable to trace how and when his mind has wandered away from Bhagavan's form, qualities, and so on, and become lost in unrelated mundane topics. We just described this, like you're chanting Hare Krishna, and even at nishta. So nishta is quite an advanced stage, because we looked at the different obstacles to nishta in previous presentations, and we can relate to those. So even at steadiness, one finds his mind kind of wandering away from the chanting and the other services we're doing. But at asakti, the mind imperceptibly withdraws from mundane, from matters unrelated to Bhagavan, and automatically absorbs itself in contemplating Bhagavan's form, qualities, etc. This kind of attachment is unknown to a devotee in whose heart asakti or attachment is not awakened. Okay, so these are some descriptions of how a devotee at the stage of asakti, their mentality. On seeing a saintly person in the morning, such a devotee inquires, "Dear sage, where do you hail from? Around your neck hangs a Sri Shalagram Śrīla in a beautiful floral case. Your tongue constantly quivers as you softly utter the holy name of Sri Krishna and relish its nectar. I do not know why you are giving a person as unfortunate as I your darshan, thus filling me with delight." In other words, why would you bother even looking at me? Which holy places did you visit on your pilgrimage? Which great souls did you have darshan of there? And who were the great devotees whose realizations you heard, by which you have made your life and the lives of others successful? So there's a great eagerness to, there's a natural awe and like whenever an advanced devotee sees someone performing devotional service, there's a very natural awe and appreciation of the devotional service performed by others. And second, there's a great eagerness to hear about others' devotional activities and specifically hear about Krishna from devotees. Thereafter, he goes to another place, and upon seeing a reciter of Srimad Bhagavatam, speaks to him thus: "Dear sir, noticing the remarkable beauty of the book tucked under your arm, I am assuming that you are learned in the Puranas, such as Srimad Bhagavatam. Therefore, please be merciful to me and rejuvenate my Chataka bird-like ears by showering upon me a nectarian elucidation of just one of the verses from the 10th canto." Upon hearing the reciter explain the Srimad Bhagavatam verse, the hairs of his body stand on end. This is an ecstatic symptom that he's feeling great pleasure, great ecstasy just by hearing a verse from the Srimad Bhagavatam. And the last one, he then goes to yet another place and presents himself before an assembly of sadhus or sages, devotees. Oh, he says, now my life will be successful because these great souls will immediately destroy all my sins. Saying this, he falls to the earth, offering those great souls his respectful, prostrated obeisances in all humility. And then he speaks to the senior, the person who's speaking. "O crest jewel of physicians, who destroy the great disease of material existence for all living entities within the three worlds, please examine the pulse of this degraded person who is extremely fallen and ascertain my disease. Please prescribe a great elixir and diet to nourish my cherished desires." In this way, his eyes full of tears, he begs mercy from him. Having received his merciful glance and accepted his nectarian instructions, he becomes overjoyed and spends 5 or 6 days there serving his lotus feet. The idea is that the devotee at attachment, he's extremely eager for the opportunity to hear about Krishna, to serve Krishna's devotees. There's extreme eagerness, and it's accompanied by extreme humility, the sense that I don't have Krishna, and Krishna is the only worshipable, the only worthwhile object, the only thing that's worthwhile in this whole world. So I don't have anything. So it's a natural humility. It's not fake. It's almost difficult to read because it sounds kind of dramatic, dramatized, like over the top, but it's a very genuine humility. Oops. Okay. What is ecstatic love? This is a verse from, so this is Bhava. So we've crossed over the ocean of the stage of attachment, and now we're arriving to the ocean of Bhava. This is a verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Let me just check the chat. What's going on here? Okay, this is Madhavi's. Got some good comments. I'm going to read this after. Oops. Thank you for your comments, Madhavi. I'm going to read these after. Ecstatic love. Shuddha sattva visheshatma prema suryam shusamya bhak ruchi bhishchitamasrinya krid asau bhava uchite. That bhakti which is composed of a special transformation of pure goodness, Shuddha sattva, and which is like a ray of the sun of prema, softening the heart with its light, is known as bhava. So bhava is the first contact the devotee has with the internal potency, the Satchit Ananda spiritual potency. A ray of that spiritual potency enters into the heart and completely softens it. So the heart becomes completely softened with this bhava, which is called like the dawn of prema. And the two splendors or qualities of bhava are that it's very rarely obtained, sudurlabha, and that it makes even liberation seem insignificant. So even liberation pales in comparison to the happiness and pleasure a devotee experiences at the stage of bhava bhakti. Bhava is very rarely obtained because if a person performs all kinds of other activities, they'll never get this love for Krishna unless they have attachment for bhakti. And even if they have attachment for bhakti, still the Lord will not give bhava immediately. He'll wait for some time. Even if a person has a sakti, the Lord will still wait for some time to see how deep and genuine is that attachment. There's two types of bhava. bhava that arises from the practice of Vaidhi Bhakti, and bhava that arises from the practice of Raganuga Bhakti. The first is less strong and condensed, and the second is very strong. Hey, Nitai. The second is very strong and very condensed. Harbol Jagadish Prabhu. We're just about done here. So these are a few descriptions of a devotee with ecstatic love, bhava. Krishna Ṭhākura says, what more can be said? The tendencies of the devotee's heart, chittavritti, are like a heap of sesame seeds. Bhava causes these tendencies to become fragrant and melt, becoming oil, and thus capable of immediately drenching all the limbs of Sri Bhagavan with affection. So the emotions of the devotee are compared to sesame seeds, and in the stage of bhava, those sesame seeds of desires, of tendencies, become oil. And then the devotee slathers the body of Lord Krishna with his feelings of love, just like giving an oil massage. Sesame oil is traditionally the oil used in abhyanga, or oil massage. So the devotee massages Krishna's body with, is a poetic description. And when this bhava manifests, it makes the recipient worshipable for Lord Brahma and others, even if that recipient is a chandala or was born in a family of dog eaters. So no matter what kind of background they come from, a person who has this love for Krishna becomes worshipable. They're the most wonderful, glorious person. They deserve more respect than a king, even than the king of heaven, even than the Lord of the universe, Brahma. When this bhava awakens, the Jata Rati Bhakta, or one in whom bhava has arisen, relishes the darkish complexion of Rajendra Nandana, Sri Krishna's limbs, the reddish hue of his eyes and lips, the whitish brilliance emanating from his smiling moon-like lotus face, and the yellow luster of his cloth and ornaments. In this way, he experiences Sri Krishna as being near to him. The devotee's voice becomes choked, and he drenches his body in a continuous flow of tears. These are descriptions of the feelings that the devotee has for the Lord, and the desire of the devotee to taste and experience Krishna's beauty. Again, as Ananda Prabhu was saying, this is a service. Krishna is beautiful, and Krishna wants to be admired by his devotees. Just as a beautiful man or woman enjoys being admired, not, by worthy persons, let's say, being admired by worthy persons. Similarly, Krishna enjoys being admired by his devotees. At this stage, the devotee's conception of self enters his perfected spiritual body, Siddhadeha, which is suitable for his chair service to Bhagavan, and which he will attain at Vastu Siddhi. Vastu Siddhi is when we leave this body and attain our spiritual body in Vrindavan, in the spiritual world. So this means that the stage of bhava, one no longer thinks of I as this body. I am my spiritual identity. That transfer of the conception of I and mine happens at the stage of bhava. That's why bhava is called as sadhya, the stage of perfection, even though it's not quite the final stage of perfection. Although that devotee continues to live in this world, having almost given up the body in which he is performing sadhana, his feeling of possessiveness in regard to Sri Krishna awakens by begging for the honey of his lotus feet. So this is, begging for the Lord's mercy, begging for the Lord's affection. This is the last one, I think. Okay, we'll read this. The devotee behaves like a miser who has obtained the great jewel of bhava and is attempting to hide that bhava from others. But just as a bright forehead indicates internal wealth, the characteristics that take shelter of him, such as tolerance or renunciation, allow learned saintly persons to identify a devotee who has reached the stage of bhava. So there's a science, a Vedic science called physiognomy. Yeah. That by a person's facial characteristics, it's like palmistry. For palmistry, it's like palmistry, but it's related to the face, the structure of the face, the size of the forehead, the size of the nose, the ears, the placement of everything. And you can understand a person's characteristics to some degree in this way, like reading a palm. So Viśvanātha Ṭhākura is saying here that just as by looking at a person's face, you can kind of get a sense of their characteristics, that even though the person with bhava tries to hide it from the external world, a learned, advanced devotee will be able to recognize this person has love of God. The opposite is the case for beginners. We want to show off what little love we think we have. We want others to recognize and see it, and we want to be noticed and appreciated for what little love we think we have. However, since to the general populace, Abhava Bhakta appears deranged and intoxicated, ordinary people cannot easily identify his actual spiritual position. These are the 9 characteristics of a devotee with bhava. They are forbearing or tolerant is another translation of kshanti. They don't waste any time. They're detached, prideless. They have a strong hope for attaining the Lord. They strong hope for attaining the Lord. A longing for the Lord. I think I may have duplicated that one. Pridelessness. I'll have to check that. Anyway, they have a strong hope for attaining the Lord or a longing for the Lord. They have a taste for chanting his names. They're attached to discussing his qualities, and they have love for living in his abode. These are the 9. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I might have messed one up here.
Shanti.
Virakti. Detachment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What is samudkanta? Oh, that's longing. Strong hope for attaining the longing for the Lord is a separate one.
It's not Ashabandha.
No, it's samudkanta.
Samudkanta.
So Ashabandha is like a hope for attaining the Lord. Is Ashabandha is, although I'm extremely unqualified, I have no qualifications, no good qualities, still I'm bound by this hope that because the Lord is the most merciful, and especially merciful to the fallen, somehow he'll have mercy on me. That's Ashabandha. Samudkanta is eagerness, would be also eagerness for the Lord, eagerness to attain the Lord. It's a little bit distinct from Ashabandha. Okay, so that's 9 if we count that. Okay, there's 5 types of bhava: Shanta, Dasya, Sakya, Vatsalya, and Prayasi, which is also called as Madhurya or Sringara. There's different terms used. In Madurai Kadambini, Viśvanātha Ṭhākura chose to use Prayasi. These are the 5 types of ecstatic love: passivity, servitude, friendship, parenthood, and conjugal love. And the varieties of ecstatic love, varieties of bhava, all these stages combined are called sthayi bhava, or continuous love of Godhead in devotional service. These 5 stages that we just looked at, those 5 types from Shanta to Madhurya. In addition to these stages, there are Vibhava and Anubaba. When the higher standard of ecstatic love is mixed with the symptoms of Sattvika and Vyabhichari Bhava, the devotee relishes the transcendental bliss of loving Krishna in a variety of nectarian tastes. So sthayi bhava is the permanent emotion in one of 5 fixed rasas. Vibhava is that which stimulates one's bhava or rati. Rati is a synonym for bhava. So vibhava is the object of love that stimulates one's feelings of love for Krishna. Anubhava are the visible actions that illustrate the spiritual emotions situated within the heart, like hearing, chanting, etc. Sattvika bhava are the 8 symptoms of spiritual ecstasy arising exclusively from Vishuddha Sattva, the spiritual transformations, bodily transformations like the hair standing on end, tears pouring from the eyes, etc. And Vyabhichari bhava, this is also called Sanchari bhava, is the internal transitory emotions which arise like waves from the ocean of the sthayi bhava, enhance it, and then plunge once again into the sthayi bhava. So these augment the sthayi bhava. They're secondary or transitory emotions like dread, apathy, different feelings that the devotees will feel that complement their permanent mood of love. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So thank you very much. Sorry if it felt a little bit rushed towards the end there. And thanks for bearing with us. That was a lot to take in one, hour and a half session. So there were a couple of comments from the chat in the Zoom room. We'll get to this. Okay, we got some good questions. I'm going to offer to the people present to ask questions, and then there's a couple questions we'll address also from the chat. Any reflections or comments or questions from anyone? Yeah, Daimai?
And one of the things that I've heard, I believe it's in the Manashiksha, or how do you say it,
Manashiksha.
Manashiksha, that like Ruchis, when you get your first glimpse of your actual spiritual form, you start to like see it, and then you're like, oh no, that can't be right. Like, no, that's not possible. It just keeps becoming more and more like, just keeps coming back to you. So you get like your first glimpse of it.
Well, it's not exactly like determined at the stage of Ruchi, one will have that revelation. It can take place earlier or it can take place later. It does kind of make sense that it would take place around the stages of Ruchi and or Asakti, because that's when one develops taste and particular attachment for the Lord. And taste means what type of taste, what flavor of taste. So, you know, a person who starts to have great taste for hearing about Krishna's pastimes with certain associates may become attracted or drawn to that type of service, those moods of love. But it can manifest before or it can manifest after. Regarding how the devotee feels or thinks when that revelation takes place, I'm not sure exactly if they would think, oh, no, can't be like, you know, I think that it's, I like to give the analogy of the revelation of our spiritual master, when we have a sense of, you know, yes, this is my guru. It's a transcendental revelation, and there is not doubt, or there may be like inkling, but it's not like a back and forth thing, you know, once it's actually confirmed. And in general, if a person is not certain of a thing, then that means there has not been revelation. It's just a kind of mental idea. So uncertainty means it's not a transcendental revelation, you know.
I guess I didn't describe it properly. It's kind of, I don't quite remember exactly, so it's not very helpful because I know when we're
That's
describing
right.
Shastras.
No, that's okay.
So it's kind of like you know how it's described in the more advanced stages, you have this like humility. It's like it can't be possible. So it's almost like a denial of like that's what's actually happening. I'm actually seeing a glimpse of my spiritual form.
Yeah, so this is like the symptom of bhava ashabandha. Like I have this desire to serve the Lord in this way, but I personally have no merit or qualification. I don't deserve that mercy, but nobody deserves mercy.
Yeah.
Nobody deserves mercy. And the longing for the Lord is the next one. So I long to serve the Lord. I long to be an instrument for the Lord's pleasure. And the Lord is pleased by varieties of service, varieties of loving devotion. So he likes this type of service. So I want to serve him in that way. It's not about me and my pleasure and my status. It's about serving Krishna and pleasing Krishna. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I did have one more question. About like you're explaining the 3 different desires that manifest in Ruchi, and I was wondering, like, I wanted to clarify, does that mean that they're actually like it's fully focused desire and there's no hesitation on that part, like, but it can come in earlier stages, like those desires are there, but you just can't fully absorb and focus on them because of the anartas and all those different things? Like, is that what you were saying when you were like?
Yeah. So those 3 desires are like impelling. These are the 3 desires that impel a person in their service, that kind of sustain their taste. Like we said, that taste is desire that's sustained by intelligence. So intelligence means I have a goal and I know that by doing this, I'll attain my goal. And I like doing the thing, but also I like doing it. And I know that by doing it, I'll obtain my goal. Versus attachment, those desires become so mature that we're addicted. It's like, so yeah, still we have a strong desire, but it's farasiki, it's self-driven. Before ruchi, those desires will be there, and even some taste will be there, but it's not the same intensity. And those desires are like not very prominent, they haven't really become solid yet. It's helpful. Okay, so we had a couple comments, questions here. One is from Agape Prabhu. How can one be past the stage of fixed and be dependent on the externals? So one is beyond nishta or steadiness, but his taste is dependent on the externals of a service. So like
the intensity of taste.
Yeah, well,
like the taste is always there, like he's fixed in what he wants or what they want, but the intensity of it is determined by the flavor of the kirtan.
We'll go back to the presentation and go back to this slide here. So in the beginning of ruchi, let me share this also with my Zoom room. In the beginning of ruchi, one's taste is dependent on external elements. That means that as ruchi first starts to manifest, it will be dependent on the quality of the kirtan or the quality of the katha. The speaker is very like poetic, good storyteller, different things that might be there that give us taste. And if those elements are not there, then we don't have taste. But one could still be said to be on the stage of taste if they've demonstrated the symptoms of steadiness, and if they actually have taste for bhakti when these things are present. But in the advanced stage of ruchi, one's taste for bhakti is not dependent on the quality of the kirtan, like the material quality of the kirtan, the material quality of the offering. So Agape Prabhu, it seems like your question is like, it seems like, how could a person have this kind of material dependency if they're already steady in bhakti, then shouldn't they be beyond that? Well, in one sense it's material, in one sense it's not, because the devotee wants to offer Krishna high quality things. So you want to offer Krishna high quality kirtan, you want to offer Krishna high quality bhoga. So it's not exactly a material, we call it external, but in one sense, external may not be the best word. It just means the specific elements of the offering. They're not exactly material elements, material ingredients. Viśvanātha Ṭhākura even mentions that for a devotee at the advanced stage of ruchi, he still may experience more taste, more pleasure when the elements of the offering are very nice, very refined. So it's not exactly a material consideration, although we've used the word external, it's just referring to the specific kind of visible elements. But those are also part of bhakti. We want to offer nice things to Krishna. So it's a part of it. Is that helpful, Prabhu? Let me know if you have anything else on that topic.
Hare Krishna. Yes, thank you so much, Prabhu, for that beautiful description. I guess from the perspective of one who's still materially contaminated and who feel like, for me, the externals are important, for me to have a so-called taste. And bhakti, what's the difference between me and someone who's on nishta? But after you gave that explanation, it really helped clear things up. Really appreciate you.
Hare Krishna. I appreciate you too, Prabhu. All right. Madhavi says, I thought about this point that in ruchi the object is bhajan. Would it be fair to say that in a sense we are worshiping our bhajan rather than trying to jump immediately and worship Bhagavan, but first of giving all reverence And finally, all affection and adoration to the process of bhajan itself, knowing that this is the way to the Lord's heart. What do you think? Well, Viśvanātha Ṭhākura mentions that technically in Ruchi and Asakti, the Lord is the object, but more emphasis, more like the taste is more derived from the process. So the process and the goal are both there, but the emphasis transfers into the stage of attachment that it's more about Krishna than about the specific things I'm doing. And she says, Bhakti Ṭhākura says, it's illegal to take sannyas before the stage of bhava, because until that point, one's purva samskaras, previous impressions, will still haunt him. So, all right, we'll have to see that quote, but I'll take your word for it. One's previous impressions. So in other words, that even if one has attachment or great taste or even steadiness in bhakti, one is not safe to take sannyas because one will be haunted by his previous life and his previous attachments, and there's a danger of falling down. All right. Anything else? Yeah, Daimai, go ahead.
It's not like a fully formulated thought, but when you're talking about like that quote about bhava, that like Shuddha comes in, and it was reminding me of something that I read, and I can't directly remember it, but it's something about how like it's actually we can't like obtain the mode of goodness independently. It's actually comes from service to the spiritual master. And I was wondering, like, I don't know if there's anything you could say on that, because it's something like, you know, like sometimes I get caught up in externals and I'm trying to practice mode of goodness for the service, but then I get lost in like that practice, and then I'm not focusing on the service. And I thought like, you know, I see things in my life like, oh, like I haven't even fully unpacked for moving, and like my garage is a mess, and I'm like, well, it'll help my chanting, but then it's like I have a toddler. There's literally so much just day to day that my whole day could be filled.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, so right now I'm like, you know, eventually like there's times I get inspiration. I'm like, oh, I just like can clean right now and it works out. And then I'm, you know, I'm getting kind of derailed here, but I've thought like sometimes just focusing on my practice, and then these things will naturally come. It'll become a lot more natural as opposed to like forced. And I wasn't sure like if that's something described more in the Shastra, like these, because we talk about the importance of mode of goodness. And I think in the first minute it discusses something about that, how like Krishna, something about the mode of goodness and Krishna appearing like in the.
Yeah. So when this verse from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu says Shuddha Sattva Visheshatma, that the Shuddha Sattva, that the pure goodness from the spiritual world descends into the heart of the devotee, it's different altogether than material goodness. It's a totally different thing. Material goodness is temporary, and it's ultimately a transformation of Prakriti, the external energy. Shuddha Sattva is the internal energy, Satchit Ananda. So when we talk about bhava, it's a spiritual energy entering the heart that's distinct from the mode of material goodness. The reason why devotees are encouraged to cultivate material goodness is because that is the most stable place from which to cultivate steadiness in bhakti. Once a person attains steadiness in bhakti, he's no longer dependent on the circumstantial of his life, you know, the environment, whether it's this mode or that mode, he's steady in his bhakti, it's not going to really affect him so much. He's already aloof. He'll naturally be drawn to a more sattvic environment generally, or wherever the devotees happen to be. But devotees generally are attracted to sattvic environments, except for the sake of preaching. They may live in other places, but generally devotees keep things clean, and they have good habits, sattvic habits. So bhakti will clean your heart. It may not ever clean your garage. And that's okay. Actually, that's not the goal of bhakti, is to have a clean garage. There's a lot of devotees in the past who've not manifested all of the external qualities of goodness, but they've had devotion. So the devotion is the most important thing. You can develop all the other qualities, but if you don't have devotion, what have you gained? But if you develop devotion, then the other qualities are less important. They will come because you understand, you realize that these are pleasing to Krishna, these are pleasing to the devotees. This is just nice for my life. sattva means it actually is the most efficient of the modes. So the devotee on bhava doesn't want to waste time. So it's actually more efficient when everything's in its place. You need to find something, you know exactly where it is, you just go get it. And when you're done using it, you put it exactly back where it belongs. Everything has its order. Everything's clean. When things are clean, that's hygienic. When things are hygienic, you don't get sick. If you don't get sick, you can perform bhakti. When things aren't clean, then things aren't hygienic, means you might get sick, means you might have to, your bhakti might be disturbed because of your illness. Your service might be interrupted. So in these ways, a devotee understands that the mode of goodness is efficient for my service, for my bhajan, but it's not valuable in and of itself. So if necessary, perpetually procrastinate cleaning your garage and all the other things that can be procrastinated, take care of your son, right? But maybe don't sign him up for a bunch of different extracurriculars that are going to make you drive this way and that way all over the place, just like you should be happy. You should take care of him, but you also have to take care of yourself. And taking care of yourself means taking care of your spiritual life. And then as you become steady in your spiritual life, then the other things will come more naturally. It'll be easier. You'll find that you're able to keep up with the other things and have steady bhakti. And okay. Jai. Hare Krishna. Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya eva cha patitanam bhavanebhyo vaishnava